we're going to be hopefully talking for around sort of 45 minutes or so. As I've already mentioned, if anyone's got any questions as we're progressing, the chat box is always a good forum to use that. Oh, I can see Adam Burt just about to join us. I used to work with Adam many years ago, and now he's like proper important at the ICAW now. Delighted that he's coming in. So welcome, Adam. Thank you for joining us.
Sorry, I'm late.
No worries. We were just killing time till you got here, Adam. Don't worry.
All right. My apologies.
But
I'm not proper important anyway.
So, thank you everybody for joining us. I know we've got a really wide range of employers, first and foremost, obviously employers of ICAW students for whom the session is pretty much targeted, but we do have a few members of, I know, the ICAW team joining us, including Adam. I can see Laura as well. Got a few of my own colleagues. I can see Ben and Ali, and I thought I saw Martin Taylor lurking around earlier on his video. So thank you everyone for joining us. I think we would, oh God, I worked out actually, in fact, March, dead exciting, next month. It's my 25-year anniversary of starting as an accountancy tutor, actually, which is kind of weird and quite exciting at the same time. But in the 25 years I've been training accountants, obviously I trained myself as an accountant prior to that. So sort of 27, 28 years ago I started, and I trained in audit in practice as an awful lot of ICAW students do. And I still remember the days of ticking bank statements for hours and hours on end. And I believe audit has moved on somewhat since then. I'm sure we will all be very conscious of the absolute tidal wave of technology that has impacted on all facets of accountancy and finance. The cloud platforms that I think we probably all pretty much use now, the app stacks that a lot of organizations now use that tie into their cloud platforms and allow a multitude of efficiencies and a multitude of kind of improvements in business decision making. There was a lot of fear, I think, a few years ago around the robots replacing humans. Actually, I hope that has been proved probably be an unfounded fear, that actually the technology, it's not replacing what humans do, it's changing what humans do. I think, the technology, it kind of amplifies human ability, and it actually takes away, those days I used to spend ticking bank statements to a cash book, I was adding no value whatsoever. So it's kind of good that all of this stuff can be done increasingly automatically with artificial intelligence, machine learning. And actually what we're seeing, I think, from my perspective as a very interested observer of the industry, is a move now towards the power of data. A lot of these platforms and a lot of the technologies that we're using are actually allowing us to now store and increasingly use huge amounts of data. And even in the last 12 months, data analytics has become an increasingly, I think, constant conversation that I'm kind of having with employers, and I know the awarding bodies are having with employers. And so I was very excited when, you've got to bear in mind I don't get out much at the moment, but I was very excited sort of back in 2020 when I was, heard the information that the ICAW, my own institute, had actually made the decision to incorporate data analytics software within their exams, within a couple of exams. And in fact, first of those will be looming next month in terms of the audit and assurance exam that we've now got the Inflow data analytics software embedded in, and it's also going to be at the corporate reporting exam at the advanced level. What I get a real sense with some of these changes in the industry that often they're driven as much by the kind of lower level staff in an organization as the higher level staff in an organization. And I just felt there was a potential danger with the Inflow software coming to the exams that a lot of the trainees, a lot of students across the country will be being trained in this new software, will be seeing the opportunities it unleashes, seeing the implications, potentially going into the office, then talk to their managers, their partners, their HR leads about this clever new data analytics software, to be met perhaps with some quite blank expressions from people for whom this is a brand new world and something that they really have, very little experience of. So I wanted to just sort of start some conversations amongst employers and particularly amongst both the ICAW and Inflow themselves, just to make sure that those of us that are perhaps of the vintage where we did tick bank statements physically back in the day, that we're actually fully informed and aware of not just what our students are going to be seeing in their exams, but perhaps the wider implications and opportunities that the technologies actually offer for us. I know, a few of our employers are already using the likes of Inflow in their practices, as well as what their trainees are seeing in their exams. So that's really the sort of background to what we're going to be talking about today. But I would like to immediately, we're absolutely overjoyed to be joined today. We've got Andrea from the ICAW who's going to be talking, but also Paul at Inflow. So I'm actually going to hand over now and let Paul take over.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Gareth. A nice introduction, and yeah, really kind of warm welcome to everyone, and I'm really glad to be here and obviously just talk from very much, I suppose, at a high level today about the partnership we have with the ICAW. Those students potentially on the call, not what the questions will be, unfortunately, but maybe just an insight into kind of the skill set that we're looking for from the partnership as well. So a very kind of brief agenda, really. Like Gareth mentioned, we're going to try and get everything covered off in about 35 to 40 minutes. But this is some of the things we kind of wanted to concentrate on in terms of giving you that introduction to data analytics and Inflow as well, what the benefits from your point of view and the profession. Then very much Andrea will lead the way in terms of looking at how and why we introduce data analytics into the ACA exams and how it will work in terms of the support for students and tutors. And then I'll give you a bit of a platform demonstration of actually using the software, so you can actually see it in action and see the key features of the modules and the benefits of obviously using them from a student's point of view and from a practice point of view. And then at the end, we'll obviously give a brief summary of everything that we've covered, looking at the opportunities for businesses and what opportunities you have as well. And hopefully, Gareth, I know we've got the chat functionality available, so please feel free to kind of jump in with questions as we go today, but we'll build in some time towards the end to look at some questions and answer those as well. No one ever likes to talk about themselves, so this won't certainly be on very long, but just to give you a kind of brief outline of kind of my experience and where I'm coming from and why I've kind of brought this session kind of to everyone today as well. And then, Andrea, I'll just let you introduce yourself as well.
Hello everyone, hi there. So yes, my name's Andrea Cook and I work within the qualifications team at ICAW, and I've been working pretty closely now for about 2-3 years now with Paul and the team at Inflow to develop or implement data analytics software within the ACA exams. So I'll be talking in a few minutes about what that will mean for exams and the resources that we've provided, but I'm very happy to answer any questions. If there's anything that you'd like me to go into more detail about, or if you'd like to have a separate discussion with me in a bit more detail, then please do reach out. But I think I'll hand back to Paul now.
Thank you. Andrea, you can probably tell how long we've been working together because we've had a baby since then and gone through that whole process. So it certainly has been a fairly long time. But just to give everyone who doesn't know what Inflow is, or certainly isn't aware of Inflow, just a brief outline of what we are. It's a solution, it's a software platform that's been designed and built by accountants for accountants. So I think that's always quite nice to point out at the very start, because we certainly aren't there to disrupt the market and the profession. We're there to very much enable accountants to do their jobs, but do them better if they can as well. And we very much are a comprehensive solution. So we have a client portal, which I'll show you on the dashboard, which obviously gives that client experience, not only from a business point of view, but also from that end client point of view as well. And really that stepping stone to transforming services. So that's exactly kind of what we are, and we combine that whole approach together, but we wrap it around in terms of that support as well. So we have a customer kind of support team who wrap around that entire kind of support, which software firms are notably potentially poor at. We certainly kind of hold ourselves very in high esteem with that. And then in an overview very much of what data analytics is, and especially within the Inflow software, it very centers around these 4 segments. You've got obviously the digital collaboration in the top left, where it's very much building on that prepared by client list, that project management workflow that teams will work through, keeping everything within one place in a very secure and confidential way. So you haven't got data, emails and files and documents being stored in multiple places in multiple different locations. It's stored within one area, which, as Gareth alluded to earlier on, is within a cloud platform. And that's accessible via mobile phone devices, whether that's tablets, whether it's desktop computers, whatever it might be, at any time as well. So that's the reason that end clients in particular they love it, because you can imagine sending a PBC list that's 150 different requests from an auditor 2 weeks out from the audit actually starting, and giving that end client time for them to work on it and send it in their own time as well. And then it's very centered around data ingestion in terms of using artificial intelligence and all those different buzzwords that you would have heard of many times before. But we automate that ingestion process that auditors and accountants, find a really kind of tough area because of the size of the data or the complexities that comes with that. And then bottom left, the whole platform is very much built around solution-based. So it's around data analytics, it's around visualizations and what that can bring not only to the profession, but to a client's business as well. We only sell to accounting firms, but I'm sure there's going to be many questions from end clients where they'll want to be used in certain modules or certain parts of the software as well. Like I said before, bottom right is very much based around that support, the constant support we give not only accountants and auditors, but the profession as a whole and end clients as well, in making sure that we don't just leave you with the software. We actually want to then make you aware of the objectives that you're trying to achieve and making sure you go through that process as well. So that's the overview. It very much centers around these 3 areas in terms of a triangle, that collaboration. We always think that data analytics is going through a very much a transformation point of view at the moment. It will always center around data ingestion, the quality of the data and how you get that in a time efficient way, and the quality of the data that you get. And then what you can actually then bring to life in terms of the visualizations around the data analytics. So we'll hopefully today give you a good brief insight into the visualizations and what it can really kind of bring to life as well, what it can give you in terms of a business. So that is very much the transformation. The key benefits clearly are going to be around these 3 areas. So from an accountant's point of view, auditors, even from an end client's point of view, it will always center around these 3 things. The quality of not only the work that you're able to produce, the output, the documentation, the reports that you're able to produce, but then think about the efficiency gains, not only by having that automation in place in so many different parts of the software, but getting somewhere a lot faster is a huge solution. And that's going to be very much the center of the exams as well, getting somewhere faster. And it's, and I will point this out, and I'm sure Andrea will as well. This isn't about how well a student can use Inflow in the exams. It's much more about developing and testing their skill set. So it'll be important that the student displays, professional skepticism, the ability to interrogate data and inform their decisions. It'll be around coming to conclusions of their own based off the evidence that's in front of them. So it's not about how well they can use the software. And if you have a student in your firm who potentially hasn't used it at all, are they at a disadvantage? Absolutely not, because that's not really what we're testing. What we're testing is the skill set in terms of the professional skepticism and everything else as well. And then lastly, just the added value, the huge added value, and moving away from potentially that compliance activities that auditors are generally seen as giving and delivering. It's much more now about adding that value to an audit, adding that value to the client as well, and giving them much more insight into what their data shows. And I think hopefully this session will really kind of open the eyes of everyone here a little bit to answering those questions as well. So just wanted to really kind of show you what this slide was talking about. And this one is concentrating on the role of the finance professional, because it very much is changing. The finance professional role in any walk of life is changing at a rapid rate, like Gareth mentioned earlier on. And it's how data analytics and artificial intelligence and all those other buzzwords around machine learning, process mining, influence what you do on a day-to-day basis. And we've even got an extra session in March, I think it's 24th of March, Gareth, where we'll start to dive into these things even a little bit more and how they can really aid and help you as a business move forward as well. And I've got 4 visualizations, because on the screen, I'm hopefully going to show you what those 4 visualizations mean in practice in a moment, and show you them in the software live and what they do, because they will be very much brought to life in the exams. That will be what the students use and what they see. And I wanted you to be brought up to speed in terms of what they actually do and what they're kind of shown as well. So as I kind of pass over to Andrea to dive very much into why introduce data analytics software into the ACA exams, I'll just leave you with that kind of thought in terms of how the profession's changing, and that we aren't here to disrupt the profession at all. It's very much to enable the profession to do things even better. So thanks, Andrea. Just over to you.
Lovely. Thank you, Paul. Hello again. So I just thought I'd spend a couple of moments talking about why we've chosen to introduce the software, and probably most importantly, why now. And I think the most fundamental reason of all is introducing this software really enables us to help strengthen that link between what students learn and what they do in their exams and what they do in the workplace. It's really helping strengthen that link and show students what actually happens day in, day out in audits. And for that reason, that's why we've really partnered with Inflo here, rather than try to introduce our own version of data analytics software, because we want to give students something that is real world and relevant, and the sorts of software and the sorts of techniques that they will be using day in, day out on audits. So that's really the very conscious decision there for us to work with Inflo and use real life software rather than create something that's a little bit more educational, as it were. And I think another reason why we've really chosen to do this, and particularly why now, is, as we all know, the profession is under the spotlight at the moment. People are looking at the audit profession in particular and asking what we're going to do to maybe help reassure the wider public as to kind of our role and the value of our role. And I think the skills around professional skepticism and judgment are really critical here, that we can help develop those skills for students so that when they go on and become members, they've got those core skills that we think can be really developed using this software, getting students to go into a data set and interrogate it and go right down to that granular transaction level and identify which out of the many thousands of transactions really stands out as being the odd one out that needs a little bit more attention or further analysis. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to develop those skills, and as I said, particularly timely at the moment. And I think another thing that we heard very loudly, actually, when we did the consultations. Many of you may have taken part in these consultations back in 2019, where we asked a number of questions around the future of the qualification and where we should go and whether we should kind of take a slightly different direction in particular areas. And one of the questions we asked was around the fundamentals and whether we are right to maintain those kind of fundamental principles, particularly around double entry bookkeeping and tax, whether it's right to include those within the qualification. And the resounding answer to that question was yes. And that in many cases, the answer we got was that it's actually more important than ever, because there's so much data out there. In many cases, the software does a lot of the analysis for us, but it's having those skills to know whether actually the information looks right, whether that transaction has been accounted for correctly, whether the software has correctly coded it to a particular category. And without understanding the fundamentals, the basics, students wouldn't be able to necessarily know the answer to that. And that's one of the great things about using this software, is in some particular scenarios, students will need to get down to that granular transaction level and be able to ask those questions about whether that transaction, for example, has been accounted for correctly, or whether maybe there's something a little bit unusual that they need to flag. Thank you, Paul. So just to talk a little bit about what we're doing within the qualification and where the software is coming in. As Gareth mentioned, it's very exciting for us that the first session will be in 2 weeks' time, actually. So this time in 2 weeks, the majority of audit and assurance students will have by now finished their exam, the first exam using our new exam software and specifically the data analytics software. And as you can see there, I've also circled the corporate reporting module at the advanced level, and the first session for that will be coming in July this summer. Very much dipping our toes really now. So you can see that we're only introducing it into 2 modules, the audit stream as it were, but certainly scope for us to look more broadly within the qualification over time as to where else we could embed software. So maybe, for example, in the tax stream, we may look to incorporate tax software, accounting software within the accounting exam. And I think this is a really great move because it's, again, helping to strengthen that link between the practical work experience element and the exams element of the qualification. But for now, it's on the audit stream and the audit and assurance and corporate reporting exams. If you could, yeah, thank you. So talking a little bit now about how this will work in the exam. You may have seen previous presentations by the Institute talk about the new exam software that we're introducing this year. So this is a little screenshot of it here for those of you that might not have seen it before. You can see here it's got the question paper and then the response area that the students put their answers in. And for the audit and assurance and corporate reporting exams, there will be a link to the data analytics software. So a student will be asked in the question, specifically told to use the software to help answer one of the questions. And for that question, they will click on that link and that will automatically take them to the software with a data set for the particular company that they're looking at in the question. So I just asked Paul if you could go to the next slide and you can then see this, the dashboard. So this is for the practice data set that we've given students to use to familiarise themselves with the software. But if you can imagine, the student clicks on that link that I showed you on the previous slide and it takes them to the dashboard for the real exam data set. And within that, they would then select the relevant part of the software to perform their analysis and inform their answer. And I won't spend too much time talking about that because that's where Paul can come in, and I'm sure he could do a much better job than I can talking about how the software will be used and the various techniques and tools that students would use within the software. But that just gives you an idea of how seamless I think it will be that the students will simply click on that link, takes them into their software, they'll perform their analysis, interrogate the data, and then they'll go back to their answer and write out their answer. And I would at this point probably go back to a point that that Paul mentioned, that we're really not trying to test students' ability to use the software. We're not testing how good they are at inflow. And I come to this as an ex-auditor myself, having never used software like Inflow before. It's been many years since I worked within audit, but I do find the Inflow software very intuitive. It doesn't take too long to be able to understand how to use it, and particularly when you work through the materials that we've produced, the guidance notes, it shouldn't take students too long to get to that level of knowledge and understanding that they need to have to be able to use it in the exam. And what we're really assessing then is the skills, that skill of kind of analysis, critical thinking, judgment, trying to think about kind of what transaction looks unusual, whether something is okay, is not okay, that questioning mindset that we're really keen to develop whilst using this software. So just to take a step back then, and I've mentioned this a few times, but I do want to reassure everyone, we have very consciously made the decision to gently introduce this software within the ACA. And we're not going in and allocating all of the marks in the exam to using the software. I don't think that would be fair and it wouldn't be right. This is new for students and for tutors and for employers. So very much a gentle introduction, dipping our toes, as it were, with around about 10 to 12 marks of the exam allocated to directly interrogating the data set. And over time, depending on how things go, we can look back and we can reflect, but I think it's very likely that that will increase from 10 to 12 marks, maybe to 20 to 30 marks, as we think about new ways we can bring the software in and as students and tutors become more and more familiar with it. I would also just add that there's one extra change that's I think a very exciting development that the software has enabled when it comes to the corporate reporting exam, in that we've now introduced advanced information for corporate reporting. You may know that at the moment, up until now, advanced information is something that we've only had, it's been unique for the case study exam, whereby students are sent a document 6 weeks before the exam in which they need to analyse and interrogate to familiarise themselves with the company in question and the scenario. For corporate reporting, we've introduced advanced information as well. We will also be producing a document that students need to look at prior to the exam, much shorter than the case study equivalent, so around about 4, 5, 6 pages. And then they'll also have a data set that they'll look at prior to the exam, which will include 11 months worth of data for the company that they'll see in the real exam. So that's quite an exciting development. And I think it's one where, again, we're trying to reflect the real world, whereby in the planning phase of an audit, you'd be given some information about your client, you'd have 11 months worth of data, for example, and then you go in on the fieldwork stage and you've got the full year's data and some more information you need to deal with, really trying to make it as real world as possible. Okay, I think there's one more slide for me, Paul, if that's okay, thank you. So I'll just finish off before I go back to Paul, just to again reassure in terms of the resource that we've got for students and for tutors to help everyone understand how the software works and how it should be used in an exam context. And just to give a brief overview of these resources, but very happy to go through them in more detail with anyone who'd like a tour or a demonstration. We've got practice data sets for corporate reporting and for audit and assurance. We have guidance notes that were written by our examiners, which explain how the software works and how it should be used in an exam context. We've got a suite of practice questions to show how students might be presented with scenarios using the software in the exam. And we've got various recordings and videos as well. And finally, we've made sure that we've supported tutors as well throughout, because tutors really need to feel comfortable and familiar with the software and how it will be used in exam context. So we've run sessions at our tutor conferences, specific sessions on the software to explain how the software works and to answer any concerns or queries that they may have. So to make sure everyone's really feeling as supported and confident as possible. So that was a very brief whistle-stop tour of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and hopefully a bit on the resources there that's reassured you in terms of what we've got out there to support your students. But I'll hand back to Paul now and very happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
I don't know if you mind me just chipping in a question, Andrew. Actually, from my perspective, at First Intuition, training students, from the employers that I talk to, particularly in practice, there's a lot of talk in recent years about a move away from predominance of kind of regulatory compliance-based work towards more advisory work, virtual CFO roles for employers. And it's, obviously it's noticeable that the two papers that the data analytics is coming into, the audit and corporate reporting, are both quite sort of backward looking, quite historical based subjects. I tended to teach the more kind of management accounting, business strategy, SBM type papers. And, I'm particularly excited about the potential that, data interrogation has for predictive ability and almost helping drive strategy of organizations. So do you think that we might see a time when data analytics comes into some of those more strategy-based papers?
Yes, absolutely. And I might refer to Adam, actually, if Adam's still on the call, because this is something that Adam's working very closely on. I'm sure he'll be able to answer it much better than I can, but certainly looking to, in the near future, introduce more data analytics tools within the strategic business management and business strategy and technology. Adam, I don't know if you wanted to just jump in and give a very brief explanation of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So the phrase that we've heard and is often used about what our students should be doing is data storytellers. And as Andrea mentioned, we're kind of riding at the moment two horses in this field. One being the introduction of Inflow data analytics software. As Gareth said, that's from an audit perspective, so that's backward looking. And the other is in the business modules for next year, so 2022, we, in the new exam platform, have spreadsheet capabilities pretty close to Excel. And we will be introducing the use of those to analyze more data. So rather than the old standard questions of here's 2 or 3 pages of narrative, we'll give them data, maybe pre-populated spreadsheets, and ask them to analyze that utilizing the spreadsheet tools, or initially a subset of. We want to be quite clear that again, as with the Inflow software, we will be very specific about what those will be, but it's more about the skills of analyzing that data and again telling the story. What is that data telling you, and importantly, can you trust it? So part of those skills will be statistical analysis.
Great, thanks, Adam.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I'll pick up in there as well. I think, Adam, to really good point, in terms of the size of the data sets and in terms of, that data and the storing of data and how useful it can be, I think no more than in the current circumstances, certainly people working from home, etc. as well. It certainly lends itself to, being able to get down to what you want to see much quicker. And so on the screen, obviously at the moment, we've got some of the other modules that obviously Inflow has in its repertoire. But what we've really done within the ACA exam is concentrate on the ones that we feel that students will get the most benefit out of, either through our pilots that we did over the last few years, through the feedback, and then really nailing down exactly what they're trying to do as well. So the 3 that I kind of want to concentrate on today and just show you a little bit more about in a moment will be Inflow Detect, Inflow Explore, and Inflow Metrics. So those 3 modules on the right-hand side here are the 3 that I want to kind of concentrate on and show you what they look like. So the first one being Inflow Explore, and this generally in practice will be the one that you use for a kind of prelim or final article review, but very much more investigative data analytics. So getting down to those visualizations underneath double entry postings. You want to go much more granular in terms of what you're looking at as well. So if I just come out of the presentation for one moment, show you what Andrea looked at just before in terms of the dashboard for Inflow, and this is what it looks like here. If I went into that module in particular, and this is exactly what the students will be doing, the first page that they'll be introduced to is this one, as you can see here now, which is that statement of profit and loss and the financial position. So very much a financial statement view. They can then just start to dive into whether any categories and the values from prior year to current year look unusual because they've moved considerably in terms of monetary amount or percentage amount. And then when they actually flick over to the account level view, they can then start to go a little bit further. So at the moment, I'm filtered on assets, and I can see that there's been almost 48% increase from prior year to current year. That's almost £2 million. And then I can see all of those accounts that make up that particular account class. And then if I really wanted to, I can then go and view all the transactions in one page very quickly. So I can dive down within assets to the transaction that I'm looking for. And if I can look for the transaction very quickly in here, then I want to obviously go and dive into the double entry post. And so within 2 or 3 clicks there, I've gone from assets and the value that it has within that account to then the transaction to the double entry. And I can see exactly who posted that transaction, where the credit and the debit's going. I can see the account codes that it's going from and to, the document type that it's being posted from, the journal description, the line description, and even when it's being posted in terms of the date stamp and the time stamp as well. And I can, if I wanted to, in practice, download those transactions and start to do some testing around those areas as well. Now, at the moment, I've got 609 pages of 10 lines per page. So it's quite lengthy in terms of what I would want to see, but Infolo then lets you put on filters and trying to dive down to exactly what you want to see really, really quickly. And that's really where the visualizations come in. So the students will get to dive into these visualizations, get potentially given a scenario, much like the information they would get in, like Andrea mentioned earlier on, an audit planning meeting, and then compare this to what the data is actually showing them. So, you know, they would use their skills, like Adam mentioned as well, to document the findings based off what they could describe as potentially real life scenarios. So what I've got on screen are the amount of transactions per period posted by 5 particular people within this client's business. And very quickly, I can go into what looks unusual. So, you know, I can see in December, there's been £318,000 worth of transactions. I may want to go and look into that and have a look at that transaction again, get down to the double entry. And I've only got 9 pages now that I'm looking at in terms of those transactions. But I may even want to cut that data slightly differently again. So I may want to look at something that I've never been able to see before. You know, who's posting on a particular day by a particular hour as well. So really quickly here, you can see that Tuesday at 12 p.m. There's a huge amount of transactions being posted at that particular time. But you can imagine a scenario where you've got, you know, transactions being posted outside of the working hours by someone that you potentially want to look at a little bit further or investigate a little bit further. And you can imagine all those different scenarios that students may get. You can obviously then dive much deeper, much quicker into those transactions without streaming through, you know, millions of transaction lines, putting my X order ahead on of what you would potentially go and see. And you can do that in a variety of ways. There's other visualizations in there that start to look at who's posted the most transactions by what periods. And so you can then detect whether, you know, there's been a starter or a leaver during the year, and why would that person post transactions in the last 9 months, but not in the first 3 months? And what questions, like Adam alluded to earlier, would that give you to then go and ask that client as well? So it's putting the power back into the auditor's hands and the accountant's hands to actually start to have those conversations that are much more meaningful, I believe, than have I got the right data, and is that right? I don't know if it is right. Well, actually, everything you have in here, all the data has been validated, it's trustworthy, it's reliable. So everything that you then go and do from here is 100% kind of right. And if I flick across to the second module, and just to show you what that looks like in terms of the presentation as well, the next module is the one that is primarily used, you can imagine, via accounting teams across the world, because we're a global company. And this one looks at that international standard of ISO 240, the address and management override of controls, which obviously we know is a significant risk on an audit engagement. The regulators obviously continually identify this as being a weakness within the audit, and one that needs a much higher degree of quality of work that's obviously being produced on it as well. So we've got 24 different routines, if you like. So when I go back over to the module, so you can see 24 different routines that look at how often a transaction gets posted, what impact would it have on the profit, you know, above materiality. Has it got an unusual value? Has it got a key word in there that you can actually input, or the auditor can input and detect? Has it got an uncommon date? Has it been posted on a non-working day? Whatever it might be, you can then obviously look and interrogate that data depending on that different routine. So if I look at how often a transaction occurs and is posted, we actually use artificial intelligence to give a scoring to every single transaction that's in there, from 3 down to 0, depending on whether it's unusual or not. So you can imagine transaction in here would get a high posting amount of 3 if it was posted infrequently during the year, whereas it would be down to 0 if it was being posted lots and lots of times. And also similarly for profit, you can imagine if a transaction is really impacting profit above materiality in an audit, then you would get a high scoring all the way down to 0 if it was less than 25%. And so what you've got on the screen in terms of this heat map is transactions that are the purple or blue dots, however you're seeing them on screen. They're the ones being posted that you can see. But the ones that I really want to note and that the students should be taking note of are the ones in the top left and the top right, the ones in the dark orange and red color, because they're the ones that Inflow is identified as being the ones of high risk or elevated risk. And so I've just used the key at the side to identify those. I can then view that transaction groupings and then even get into the details again of the transactions and the double entry posting. So again, so much quicker to go and get exactly what you want without having a VLOOKUP or pivot table in Excel or looking at millions and millions of lines and what am I actually trying to get out of this work. You can see how quickly you're able to do that within the software just here. And just using some visualization such as this to then go and dive into exactly what you need. And then, and I judge that I'm going pretty quick here in terms of the presentation, but just wanting to give you that high level overview. The third module that the students are also going to be using is Inflow Metrics. And this is where, like Gareth mentioned just earlier on, this is getting more into that value added piece that I was talking about in terms of the key benefits. So the features here are that we're going to give lots of automated financial KPIs and stats that are benchmarked across national averages or maybe across accounting systems or maybe even regions within the UK or within a particular location in the world. And then it really complements the risk assessment that's done as well, because using these benchmarks, you can have that value output in client reporting that you can go and then produce as well. So what that looks in practice, or what it looks like in practice is as I navigate over to Inflow Metrics, at the very start, the students will be greeted with this screen, which shows them 4 different financial ratios that they click into, as well as 7 different financial information categories. And if, for example, I went into income receivables, for example, you'll see that they'll then be presented with, you know, a lot of different metrics or insights into that particular business. So if I'm pulling out one in particular here, I'm looking at the credit period that this client gives their suppliers. So almost 82 days. If that's way up in the 4th quartile, because I can see that it's over in this red area, what does that mean to me? You know, what are the questions that gives that accountant or that auditor about this client's business? You know, if they could get that down, if they could advise their client in trying to reduce those number of days down to, you know, a more suitable national average level of maybe 60, 62 days, then what would that give that client in terms of working capital that they could then go and invest back into the business? You know, even things like the time invested in income reversals, if we can reduce those down to the 1st quartile, what would that give that, you know, accountant in terms of time back that they could then go and use more wisely and giving insights into the business as well. So lots of different benchmarking, KPIs and insights that you can see even from using this module, that when the students are given the scenarios in the exams, that they're going to have to really start to use their professional skepticism and work out whether something's actually true or false, or what it's actually shown and evidence that as well. So again, looking at the screen, if something's in the green area, then that's okay for me as a business, but you can see the different functionality within the software. It gives you what prior year was and whether it's increased or decreased this year. You're actually then able to click on the cog icon and start to then compare it with, like I mentioned earlier, different or the same corporate statuses, the same regions, or even the same industries. And if I then compared it with the same region, those dials will change live and dynamically because of my different selections. So you can benchmark this and it's live, it's not static data, it's constantly evolving and constantly moving. So you can see how valuable that would be for students to get that in a really live environment as well. So those are the 3 modules that we are very much concentrating on and that students are going to be using in, like Andreas mentioned, just over 2 weeks' time. When we produced all the pilots, and Adam and Sean and Andrea were amongst all of those pilots with the students that we conducted, this was the actual feedback that they gave. So this is the words that they use. I don't think we even changed any of the words, if they're grammatically correct or not, but you can imagine and see the different statements that they made, that it felt like what we were doing in work, very much so now. You know, they would never run out of things to say, and they could focus on some of the more challenging parts of the question, and actually it would save time on those simpler tasks. So that was some of the feedback that they gave from those pilots that we conducted. And what I wanted to just leave you with, just before I summarize the presentation today, was things that we potentially will look at in the March session as well, is what you can then leverage. So what can you, on the call today, leverage in terms of the opportunities? Does automation of using artificial intelligence, using just, software in the cloud, what would that then give you? You can imagine getting from that left-hand side of the screen all the way to the right. It takes a long process, but even just thinking today about what existing tasks have you got that you potentially could improve the efficiency and quality of if you could automate those, and just think of those simple existing tasks that take a lot of time. It's every single month, of the year. And if you could automate those, what would that give you back in terms of the time, all the way to, could you get up to that right-hand side in terms of redefining the services that you can offer as well? And what just on the tranche on the bottom in terms of the orange yellowy area is, you can imagine if you can automate some of these selections and things that you may do, you can get into, like Gareth mentioned, that value-added insight part of what we're trying to offer as a profession, into a continuous service delivery that's almost like an analytics as a service offering that is not predefined, and it's not compliance side of things. It's very much more into the value-added piece as well. So just to kind of just summarize where we've been today, we've been very much into what the software is and what Inflow does, into just having a quick overview of what data analytics is around the different techniques in terms of machine learning and process mining within the software and within certain modules as well, and how that integrates into the ACA exams as well, and how that will work in practice, what the students will be doing, the modules that they'll be actually looking at, the scenarios that potentially they'll be given, but also the support for the students and the tutors as well. And I've just mentioned there, Gareth, I hope you didn't mind that, we've got a breakfast meeting on the 24th of March if other people want to join as well, where very much we'll be diving into more of that, how you can leverage the data analytics in your own firm, and what Inflow could do and help you meet those objectives. Because moving from firm to firm, whether it is compliance activities or whether it is value-added pieces that you're looking at, we want to make sure that there's a module or there's part of the software that you can use to try and meet those different objectives as well. So I will put that screen up, Gareth, and hope that there's a few questions from everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Andrea. And in fact, you mentioned the forum we're doing in March a couple of times, so I've just dropped a registration link. This session was very much focused on data analytics within specifically the ICAEW exams, and therefore relevant to ICAEW employers. The session in March is actually going to be a sort of broader look at the role of data analytics in accountancy and finance more generally. So we're going to be hearing from Paul. We've got a couple of other speakers who are going to be joining us. I think we've got the business analytics lead from Cambridge Judge Business School, for instance. So that's hopefully going to be a sort of broader discussion around what data analytics can do, which I guess we've already touched on a little bit. One question I had, and I don't know whether this maybe Andrew or possibly even Adam. Obviously, the traditional exam is students demonstrating a certain amount of technical knowledge in a quite defined period of time under exam pressure. And I'm wondering to what extent data analytics perhaps changes that dynamic. Is a time-pressured exam as relevant when students perhaps aren't demonstrating the same level perhaps of technical knowledge? It's more about the insight they're deriving from the software that they're using, and whether that actually changes. Could we see a project-based approach to ICAEW exams, or is that going to be, would that be too radical?
If I start, and Adam, I'm sure will want to say something as well. I think that's very much what's led the introduction of the advanced information at corporate reporting, the view that if we can support students and give some of that information in advance, it will mean that their assessment, their analysis will be much more robust and thorough. Like you say, in a 2.5 hour or 3.5 hour exam, with the constraints of time pressures and everything that brings, there is only so much kind of in-depth analysis they can do. So I think that's a great opportunity that we'll hopefully see with the corporate reporting exam, that they'll really get into that 11-month data set in the run up to the exams. As far as I'm aware, nothing that I'm aware of more broadly within the Institute around more project-based exams. Adam, I don't know if you want to jump in here, if there's anything that you wanted to say on that.
I'd love to.
I knew it.
Personally, I don't like exams, and I don't think ICAW students are best benefited by sitting exams. However, we are a highly regulated qualification, and therefore the powers that be deem it necessary. But what I would like to see, and whether that happens within, whilst I'm still at the ICAW, who knows when I'll leave, is that the exams do become more assessments rather than 3 hours, sit down, and within that time period, create answers. And so those assessments could be group-based, could be project-based, and hopefully that won't be too far away. But that's my own personal view from within the ICAW. Don't go out saying that the ICAW is going to drop exams tomorrow.
Not although I would fully expect the Institute to be at the leading edge of, any revolutions like that. And actually, I mean, Adam, just in terms of your thoughts on this as it positions the Institute, I'm guessing you're quite proud of this?
Oh, immensely, immensely. Sean and I are lucky enough to sit on various committees talking to our counterparts around the globe. And, data analytics in its broadest sense is being talked about by everyone. But in terms of the way in which we can make our exams more work focused, more real life work based, I would say we're certainly leading the way, and compared to some, many years ahead. So yeah, we're incredibly proud, and we look forward to this as a start of where we think we'll be going in the years to come.
Fantastic. Well, we're pretty much out of time there, so I just want to thank our speakers today. I think that's been really fascinating. So thanks to Paul, thanks to Andrea, and thanks to Adam also for joining us and chipping in. I think this is a discussion we're all going to be involved in going forward. Thanks for our audience for attending and for joining us. Like I said, we will be distributing a recording to everybody, and do feel free to join us in the session in March. And me and Paul are talking about trying to put together a session in the summer, a bit of a deeper dive into looking at the specific applications of, and he promises it's not just about inflow, he promises it's about kind of data analytics more generally, and the way that would be applicable, particularly in practices at the moment. But I think we can all envisage much wider applications of these sorts of technologies and the sort of insight that they're going to be able to give us to make effective decision making, whether for our own organisations or for clients. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I found that absolutely fascinating, and I look forward to catching up with a lot of you in the near future. But apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your month, and fingers crossed for Boris later on. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Gareth.
Bye-bye.